Today's episode brings a story that's raw, real, and human. We are joined by Kevin Ives, a seasoned entrepreneur, author, and Center for Radar business leader whose journey moves from street kid in Queens to garage rock musician to commercial real estate developer and now author of Book of Me. Kevin has lived the full spectrum of success, loss, reinvention, and the ongoing dance between creativity and control. Diagnosed with bipolar disorder in midlife, he's learned to balance the emotional highs and lows of both business and brain chemistry, turning his struggles into strategy and his pain into purpose. Yeah. With that, I give to you all my listeners, Kevin Ives. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Kevin, from rock bands to boardrooms, how did those early creative experiences shape the way you approach business today?
Well, it's interesting, for the first half of my life, I didn't know I was bipolar. Started when I was about 18 or so. I got my first big depression, and it was like a big black cloud came over my head. And I've always been a very positive guy, a very up guy, but all of a sudden, this cloud came over my head, and this is back in the 70s. And back in the 70s, you didn't go to a doctor to get a diagnosis if you got depressed. So I'd fall into a deep depression for probably 2 or 3 months. And the first time it scared me, but then eventually it passed. So I didn't think much of it. I just thought that everybody gets depressed once in a while. And I moved on. Well, it seemed like about every 2 years, this black cloud would come over my head again. And it kind of got worse and worse over the years. And I kind of ignored it and just kind of toughed it out. I was always very successful in business because I'm a very high energy guy. And I tend to outwork everybody. Even though I never went to college or anything, I just seem to have the knack. Real estate's an interesting business. You don't need a college degree for real estate. It's very simple. Good with people, good with numbers. That's real estate. So I was very good with numbers, and I love people. I'm a people guy. So anyway, it wasn't until around I guess I was about actually 50 when I finally got such a bad depression that I collapsed. And then I got diagnosed, and the doctor said that I was bipolar. And then it rang true because I said, okay, so that's why I'm so high energy most of the time, because when you're in the manic phases of bipolar, it's fantastic because I'm super productive and I outwork everybody. But then when those lows hit and you get depressed, it's not only depressing, but it's actually dangerous. So he put me on medication. So I guess part of the thing as far as managing it goes is if anybody has a depression or has any sort of a inkling about a mental situation, you go to a doctor and you get diagnosed. You don't ignore it. In the 70s, when I was a kid, going on medication, that was for wimps. You don't want to do stuff like that. But in today's world, they understand this stuff a lot better. So it's very important to go to a doctor and get diagnosed. And if you need medication, go on the medication. Now, I have to admit, there's a lot more to my story. Now, as far as managing it, the doctor that I got with said to me, I was one of these guys that had a million things going on. I was an elected official. I was in charge of a huge portfolio of real estate for a big company called Kimco Realty. I handled 85 shopping centers and about 3 million square feet of real estate. And I was doing my own developments. And I was active in church. I was the finance guy. We're building a new building. So I just had too many balls in the air. And that's why I think I collapsed, because I think I just pushed it too hard. And I had kids too, so I had to be careful. So the first thing I did was take my doctor's advice. And he said, you have to get rid of that job. You have to resign as a commissioner. You have to take 4 or 5 months off. And you have to spend time with your family, smell the roses a little bit, enjoy life. And that's what I did. He put me on medication. The medication stopped the depressions. And I took time off. Fortunately, I had some stock options, so it wasn't a financial issue for me. And I got a lesser job. And I did that for 6 months, a year and a half. And then, so you always take your doctor's orders. And the doctor always said, even if you feel good with the medication, because the medication does balance you out, Some people think, well, I'm fixed, so I can go off the medication. And they stop taking it. Never stop taking the medication. Not without a doctor's control or a doctor supervising it. Because that's what a lot of people do. They get on medication, they think they're just fine. Then they say, I don't need this stuff anymore, and they stop taking it. And then they crash, and then they're worse. So in my case, it's kind of interesting because although I never got depressed anymore after I was on the medication, I noticed that I wasn't as sharp as I used to be. And nobody else could notice, but your own self. I was always the quickest guy in the room, sharpest knife in the drawer, fastest at everything, outwork everybody, and all of a sudden I wasn't that anymore. There were certain things I couldn't remember. Nobody ever noticed, but I knew it. And it bothered me. But I had no depressions. So there are certain sacrifices you have to make. If you're bipolar, you have to make sure that you do what's best for your family and what's best for your children, and not necessarily what's best for you. So I was kind of resigned to the fact that I would work for somebody else and, kind of have a successful life, but not necessarily a super productive life. If that's what it took for me to stay healthy, then that's what I was going to do. And I stayed like that for almost 10 years, from 50 to about 60. And over the years, it bothered me more and more. And I started feeling a little bit more not all there. And I'd go back to the doctor and say, I would never go off the medication without him. But I would go back to the doctor and say, is there anything you can do for me to, I still feel a little dumb. I'm not comfortable with that. And I was on this medication called Depakote, which is a kind of a depression medicine. It kind of dumbs you down a little bit. And he would always try to talk me out of it and say, well, you're doing fine. Don't worry about it. And I'd say, I'm forgetting things. He'd say, don't worry about it. So I was doing just fine. I was an average guy, but I'm not really an average guy. But I had to be on the medication. Well, after 10 years, I said to him, listen, I'm not happy the way I'm at, even though I can manage this. I'd like to kind of get off this medication, or some of it if I could, try something else. Very risky to change medications. You got to be very careful with that. Now, I would never do it without a doctor's advice. So he said to me, okay, well, he said, I can probably, if you really want, I can try weaning you off the Depakote and raising your Wellbutrin, which is the other medication. And that might work for you, so we can try that. And I said, okay, let's do it, because I make very quick decisions. And he goes, well, not so fast. He said, if we do it and it doesn't work, I'm going to have to put you back on the Depakote. And I said, all right, no big deal. Let's try it. He said, no. He goes, once I take you off the Depakote, and if it doesn't work and I got to put you back on the Depakote, it'll take a lot more Depakote to get you level again to where you are now. He goes, you're going to be dumber. I said, oh. I said, well, you know what? I'll go for it. Because I just didn't, I was doing fine, but I was so used to being manic and so used to being very, very top of the class kind of guy. So he did it. And I got to tell you, did you ever see that movie, A Beautiful Mind? With
Yes,
Russell Crowe, when he was I'm not saying I'm a genius, but he was a mathematical genius, but he was schizophrenic. And
yes.
the only way he could stop seeing people was to take heavy medication. And when he was on the heavy medication, he wasn't seeing people anymore, but he was not a mathematical genius anymore. And he and his wife saw this, and she felt terrible about it. And she said, you know what? If you want to go off the medication, go ahead. Now, he went off his medication, but he became a mathematical genius again. He got a Nobel Prize. But he had to deal with seeing people that weren't there. Now, I'm not schizophrenic, and I'm not a mathematical genius. But I can tell you this. When he started transitioning me, like taking the Depakote down and the Wellbutrin up, I'd say in about 3 weeks, 4 weeks, it was like my eyes opened again and I was back. It was fantastic. I was like, holy cow. And all of a sudden I realized that the real Kevin was back. And it's funny because my wife says to me one day, are you taking your medication? I said, of course I am. I would never not take the medication. And she goes, well, are you sure? I said, yeah. She goes, well, you're starting to talk real fast again. You're having a lot of ideas. And I said, well, I kind of adjusted the medication. Well, she got mad at me. What do you mean you adjusted it? Because she had to go through me before I was, medicated. And she got angry with me. And she said, think you should talk to me about it first? I said, well, the doctor never asked me to talk to you about it. So she would have said no, because she didn't want to go through the manic depressive Kevin, right? But I can tell you this, Neil. It was like I woke up from a fog, and all of a sudden I was working at 100% again. And I said to myself, I just lost 10 years. I got 10 years of catching up to do. And now there was nothing wrong with being on the medication. I just wasn't, as a bipolar, I didn't have that manic side. And I existed just fine, but I liked the manic side. So, the adjustment worked beautifully. And I guess this is kind of the moral of the story. If you don't feel right on the medication, don't be afraid to talk to the doctor and tell the doctor you're not feeling right. It's not working just the way I want it to or the way you want it to. Always talk to the doctor. Don't keep it to yourself. Talk to the doctor, but don't mess with your medication, because in my case, it took 10 years, but the doctor listened to me and he made the adjustments. And in my case, I'm a very blessed man because the adjustments worked. And now I have all the benefits of the manic side, and I still have never had a depression in 20 years, not one, 20 years. So I feel like I have my mental disease, and a lot of people get embarrassed about having a mental disorder in some way, but I feel like for me, it's like a superpower. So I feel like I've actually enhanced my life by getting on the right medication and keeping the manic side, which makes me very productive, and it worked out great for me. So and another thing that I want to point out is that, the hardest part about finding that you have a medical condition and then having to go on drugs, so to speak, is when you crash and burn, when you've got a mental situation. Doctor said take time off. I mean, he put me in a halfway house, and I was out of work for 4, 5, 6 months. Now I could afford that, but the hardest part, number one, you tend to blame yourself. I'm a Christian man. I almost killed myself, and I was like, what kind of a Christian guy kills himself? I mean, what kind of faith do I have? I mean, I really questioned my faith, questioned my dependency on God. I was like, what was I thinking? I had a kind of wife and 3 beautiful kids. I mean, why would I even consider doing that? Mental disease is very serious. I have voices telling me that I should step out of my wife's life, that I should take myself out of the picture, kill myself so my wife could marry a real Christian man to raise my kids the right way. There was voices telling me things like this. Sorry.
So how did you, I know it's very hard for you to talk on these things, but let's say a person is right now in that same feeling, he's thinking to unalive himself. How would you advise him to not to do so and live about his life?
Well, the first thing you have to do is identify or admit to yourself that there's a problem. Now, if you're getting depressed, there's a problem. So certainly seek out, talk to your loved ones. Make sure that you've got somebody that you trust, that you can talk to, that you can share all your intimate feelings with, because it makes you feel very embarrassed. And it makes you feel like you're a loser. And you don't want to tell people. Make sure you have a confidant, which should be your wife, or a family member, or a clergyman, or church guy, or close friend, or family member. Tell people how you feel, and then go get medical help. Go to a doctor, go to a psychiatrist, or go to a counselor of some sort, and go. Don't hold it in. Don't hide it. Don't think it's not a big deal. That's what I thought. I thought it was not a big deal. I thought everybody got depressed once in a while, and it wasn't a big deal. I ignored it for 20, 30 years. They got worse and worse and worse until they finally conquered me. So you definitely have to talk to people about it. But another thing is to, after you get the help that you need, don't feel like you're some sort of a secondary person. God loves us all. He made us all very special. Everybody's got ups and downs. But if you have something wrong with you physically, God wants you to get it taken care of and get on the right medication. There's nothing wrong with that. And you should not feel embarrassed about it. Now, I'm not saying that you go telling everybody on the planet about your personal life. But the biggest problem that I found, I counsel people now. I'm an elder at my church. And I counsel people who have depression. And I think God, I'm not saying God brought this on me for this reason, but, a lot of people will blame God when they have bad things happen in their life. And I don't. God gave me this affliction for a reason. Maybe it's because he wanted me to depend on him. Maybe it's because he wanted to use this affliction to allow me to live it so I can help others. And that's what I think. So when I counsel people, when they listen to me, I was there. I was in their shoes. I'm bipolar. I've suffered deep depressions for 40, 50 years. So when you can share that with somebody, it has impact. They realize that you know what you're talking about because you've been there. Whereas other counselors who were never depressed, it's very hard for them to relate. They read stuff in books, they go to school for it. It's not the same. When you've lived it, you get their attention and they listen to you. So I think God put this on me so that I could help other people. But the most difficult part that I found for myself, and I know it's the same for other people, is once you get depressed and you go to a doctor and you step away from the world to recover for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, whatever it takes for you to get yourself mentally and balanced again. Now you got to re-enter the workforce. You got to go back to a normal life. That's the hardest part, because what happens is people will say, "Where'd you go? You dropped off the planet for 4 months. I haven't seen you." And you don't know what to say. And you don't want to lie, but you don't want to tell your whole horrible story. And a lot of people have trouble or almost don't want to re-enter real life because they're embarrassed, they're humiliated, they feel like there's something broken because they've got this affliction. That's not true. God made us all quality people. He loves us all. And he gives us all the things that are good and bad about us. And even our afflictions, he uses to benefit his kingdom and to help other people. So I really tell people when I speak to them, jump back in with both feet. You don't got to tell everybody everything, but don't be ashamed. Jump back in. And now I think I'm in a position where I feel like my life is a success story. I'm more successful now than I have ever been because I've kind of salvaged the manic side. Makes me very productive. I have high energy and I have no depression because I got fixed the right way through medication. So in my opinion, a lot of people think they have a mental situation, a mental disease. They're embarrassed about it. They think it's something that they should hide or they shouldn't talk about it. I don't think so. I share it with a lot of people. I'm very open about it. It's in my book. I'm talking to you about it on podcasts because I want people that have afflictions like this to know it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's something that's in your system and it can be fixed and you can go on. I see my bipolar, especially my manic side, as a superpower. Because I am an incredibly productive guy and a hardworking guy. I'm 70 years old. You probably guess I was about 50, 55. I'm 70, and I got more energy than a 20-year-old. That's kind of the manic side. I've been benefited by this. So I think I've not only survived being bipolar, but I believe that being bipolar in some ways has enhanced my life in many ways. It made me appreciate the family I have, my wife and kids. It made me have respect for God for bringing me through it. And now it's enabling me to talk to people, encourage them, build them up, and let them know that there's nothing to be ashamed about. So to me, it's a superpower. It's made me successful. And I told the young lady that booked me with you, I said, you know what, go out and book me some podcasts. Or I think I should speak in front of medical groups and in front of people that have depressions, people that have suicidal tendencies. They should hear my story. I almost killed myself. Instead, God brought me to the right doctor, got me on the right medication. My loving wife and my kids supported me 100%, and my friends. And now I can conquer the world. You know what? Having a mental disease is what it is. You can conquer it if you focus on it, pray about it, develop your spiritual life. And I'm telling you, you can be very successful. So I consider it a superpower. That's the way I look at it. So and I want other people to know that their life is not less than what it should be just because they got some sort of crazy mental disease. A lot of people get it. You can get past it. So I talk a lot, so I'm not sure how much time I'm going here. So any other questions that you have?
Yeah. So I was wondering that you are now an author and what compelled you to tell your story, and how has writing helped you have a better mental being or well-being in your life?
That's a great question. It's funny. As you can tell, I'm very talkative. So I've been a storyteller all my life. That's just the way I'm built. I tell stories, and all of my friends would tell me, you should write a book. You got so many stories. And I'd say, I don't have the patience to sit down and write a book. I'm too high energy. I don't have time for that. And they say, you really should. You have a lot of stories. Well, one day I kept track of all my stories. Every time I remembered when I write down, I'd have to write just one line. You know, I had this dentist when I was a little kid, and my parents were poor, and he used to drill our teeth with no Novocaine. So me and my brother were scared to death of this guy. We used to call him Sotlin the Butcher. His name was Dr. Sotlin. So it's a funny story of when I was 6, 7 years old. So I would just write down Sotlin the Butcher, and I remember the whole story. So after about 6 months, a year, I had over 100 stories, and I said, you know, I actually have a lot of content here. My stories are encouraging. They're funny. They're short. And they talk about a life from 5 years old all the way to 70 years old. So what I did was I spoke to a person who's going to help me write the book. I said, I'm going to write a book. I don't know how to do it, but I'm going to. And she said, well, why don't you talk it into a dictaphone if you can't sit down and write? And I said, well, that's a good idea. She said, these days you can download things into a manuscript. I said, okay, that's good, but I'm a people person. I'm better in front of a crowd. You know, drinking coffee with a room full of people or sipping a beer with my buddies, you know, and telling the stories. I'm very animated. The stories are better when I'm talking to people, not just talking into a dictaphone by myself. And, you know, I ran for mayor. I've done a lot of things. You should read my book. I ran for mayor. I lost. And I failed at probably 90% of the things I've done, but I'm very successful because I've had an enormously powerful life. Life's about the journey is my motto. It's not about getting to the top of the mountain. It's about the climb. It really is. Especially in my life. I've done a lot of crazy things. But in any case, there was a young lady who helped me do commercials for my mayor's run. And she said, well, why don't you open a YouTube channel and tell your stories into the camera? She goes, I'll come to your office. And we did it right here in this office. She goes, I'll film it. You can tell the stories to me and my boyfriend. He's the sound man. I said, that's a great idea. She came to my office every other Saturday for 3 hours. And she'd say, what stories are you going to do today? I said, I don't know. I haven't decided. She said, what do you mean you haven't decided? We're going to start in 2 minutes. I said, so start. She goes, you don't need to prepare or have notes? I said, no, I know the stories off the top of my head. I rattled off over about 6 months, 70 stories, one take into the camera, and I put them on YouTube. And then from YouTube, I downloaded it to a manuscript, 140,000 words. It ended up being a 500-page book. Now, I had to have a little help organizing it because it's me running at the mouth and all of that. But I put a lot of photographs because I, for some reason, I have a lot of pictures of my childhood. And even my teen years, I took a lot of pictures. So you've got to read this book. I mean, I don't want to sound narcissistic, but it's a great book. I mean, starts off from 5 years old, goes all the way to 70, all my ups and downs, including my bipolar and many other things that I went through in life, businesses that I started and failed. Listen, I call myself the New York Forrest Gump, and there's a reason for that. First of all, I've been in a million different situations, just like he was. And being bipolar, you know, he was kind of autistic. And well, I'm kind of bipolar. So my head's always going 100 miles an hour. And Forrest Gump owned a shrimp boat. Well, you know what? I owned an oil tanker in the Caribbean. Me and about 5 friends bought an oil tanker in the Caribbean. I lost more money on that venture, but it's the best chapter in my book. So that's my tag, my elevator pitch is, yeah, I'm the New York Forrest Gump. Forrest owned a shrimp boat. I owned an oil tanker, and all my stories are true. And I'm actually working with 2 producers out in LA right now. They want to make a TV series out of my life story. So listen, the book's going to be a TV series. It's going to be a movie. I'm getting an Oscar. I tell people this all the time. And if you treat me right, then maybe I'll let you walk the red carpet with me. I'm a very positive guy, but so it's called, and I have the book right here. It's called Book of Me, Kevin Hipes, The Life and Times of Kevin Hipes, the New York Forrest Gump. It's, again, I don't want to say it's a good book, but it is a good book. It's, people say it's like talking to me. So anyway, all of a sudden I have this book, and I have to admit, it's done a lot for me because I said, you know, I did fail at a lot of things. I did lose a lot of money, my poor wife. I mean, I went broke at 60 years old, and I had to negotiate my way out of all sorts of debt. And I had to start all over, sold all my houses. I had to go rent a house at 60 years old. My poor wife, she loved me, and she didn't care. We're Christians, and you know, God takes care of us. But they went through a lot with me because I'm a crazy guy. But you know what? I got off that medication and I started all over again at the age of 60. And now I'm 70. And you know what? I'm worth a lot of money again. I'm not a zillionaire. I'm no Elon Musk, but I make a good living. I've got money in the bank. I own a bunch of different properties. I wrote a book. It's going to be a movie. I don't really even care if I make any money on it. I'm just doing this because I want people to hear the story. Because this story is about an entrepreneur. It's about a guy that had a mental situation that could have hurt him. It's about a guy that was a long-haired hippie who was in a rock band till he was almost 30 years old, I never felt like I was as good as other people because I never went to college and I was a street kid from Queens. And then I realized one day that, you know what? God made me special. He made us all special.
True.
And that I realized that I can do anything. And here's the best part. I know you got to go soon. So here's the best part. Middle of my life, 30 years old, I was a very worldly guy, not a horrible person, but I drank a lot and partied a lot. I was in a rock band, I did all that stuff. And my older brother was a preacher. And finally, one day, he corralled me and said, Kevin, if you got to get your act together. I was in this rock band. My first marriage was blowing up in my face. And I said, what do I got to do, Mike? He says, you get your act together with God. He said, that's the first thing you got to do. So I said, okay, I'll do it. So I started reading the Bible. He showed me the passage to read. This is my older brother. And when I started reading the Bible, I said, holy cow, this stuff's pretty easy to understand. It's straightforward stuff. So all of a sudden, I realized what I was missing, not understanding who Jesus is and understanding that he died for my sins and that there was a vehicle for me, no matter what, to have an eternal life forever in heaven with him. And all of a sudden, it hit me. And I decided to just become a Christian. And I did. And my life changed 100%. And it even got more exciting and more interesting from that point forward. But here's what I learned. Scriptures. There is so much wisdom in biblical scriptures. A lot of people think it's for holy rollers and it's just to keep you in line till you get to heaven. No, that's not it at all. You read the scriptures and you gain so much wisdom and knowledge and confidence in your life that you can have a very, very exciting and exceptional life. There's one particular passage, and I'll kind of end with this, that I read. It was in James chapter 4:6. It says that God opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. And all my life, I was afraid to do things. And many people are like that. Matter of fact, most people are like that. They're afraid to try stuff. Why? They're afraid to fail. They don't want to look bad with their friends. They don't want to be humiliated. So they don't try. They hold themselves back. They don't realize what they're losing in life by not trying new things and not allowing themselves to fail. But they do it because they don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to be humiliated. And when I read that passage that said that God opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble, I said, well, wait a minute. If I'm humble, I can't be humiliated. It's not possible. You can only be humiliated if you're prideful. That hit me like a ton of bricks. And I said, holy cow. And then I said, and I'm going to heaven, so why should I be afraid of anything? And from that day forward, I started trying everything that I was afraid of. I did it first, and I kept doing it until I got past it. Public speaking, I can't do that. Doesn't matter. I'm going to do it. I'm going to keep doing it until I'm comfortable with it. Anything. Any kind of thing. And you know what? When you read the book, you'll see how many crazy things I tried and how many things I failed at, but how much I learned and how much I enjoyed an exciting life going through it, because money's not what it's all about. It's about the journey. Now, you got to be responsible, take care of your family, but you got to try stuff. You want to climb that mountain. You want to depend on God. You want to have fun. And I've had an amazing life, and that's what the book's really about. It's about a guy that conquered every fear in his life and had no idea how special he was until he tried stuff. That's not all, but it's a lot of that. And the stories are funny. So get the book, Book of Me, Kevin Hives. It's on Amazon, $6.99, and or buy a paperback for $24.99, or buy the collector's edition hardcover. It's a lot of money, $60. It's not me. It's the Amazon people. I make like $2 on this book. They must make the other $50. I don't know. But I'm not doing it for money. I'm doing it to help other people so that they could get a laugh out of life, see a guy that's done some crazy things but enjoyed life all the way to the end. And I'm not done yet. I might be 70. I got to tell you, I'm probably going to live to be 100. I'm enjoying life. I'm having fun. And I don't want to make too much money. money's actually dangerous. You make too much money, you end up getting in trouble. So it's good to have to depend on God and not be so self-sufficient. So anyway, that's my story. I hope I've answered enough of your questions. Do you have any last questions?
Yes, I think that was the last question we have, because
Right.
you covered most of the things in your stories, in your answers. I do recommend the Book of Me by Kevin Hives. And Kevin, if you can share us more ways to connect with you, like your YouTube channel, LinkedIn, Instagram, if you have, please.
Yes, and now keep in mind, I'm an old guy. I'm 70, so I'm not so good on social media. I have people that put these things up for me because I'm not good. But my YouTube channel is called Planet Hypes, and it's spelled Hipes. Planet Hypes is my YouTube channel. I also, because I was in a rock band, we recorded 20 songs professionally recorded. I put them on Spotify. So the name of the band is called The End. It's now, I got 20 songs on all these Amazon music pages and Spotify. It's great music from 45 years ago. The name of the band is called The End. And if you want to hear one of the songs, there's a lot of The Ends out there. So you have to put in The End and then the word guarantee. That's one of the songs. When that song comes up, the rest of them will come up. But Planet Hypes, I have I also have a web page, but I can't remember what it is because I just got it. I've got 2 or 3 different YouTube channels and web pages and stuff. I'm just not a details guy, so I should have been better prepared for that. But if you go to Planet Hypes and watch the videos, you'll figure me out and you'll get the book. And then you'll find there's videos about my music on there and how we made the music. There's some very funny stories about being in a rock band. Just very, very funny stories. When you're in a rock band, you go through some crazy things. You do some crazy things. I'm not proud of everything I did before I was a Christian, but it's part of my journey. So I'm not embarrassed about it. I just live a different life now. So Planet Hypes, go there and check me out. I was an elected official too. Politics. I've done it all. I have political politics.
So you got it, listeners. Planet Hypes is the place you need to go to connect with Kevin. And what a ride from music to real estate, from mania to mastery. I think, Kevin, in the Oscar, in the red carpet, where I would be there accompanying you.
TV series that's coming up. That's right. A movie. Listen, I'm a big talker, but I'm having fun. So,
in essence, Kevin, your journey reminds us that success isn't about avoiding the lows. It's about learning how to navigate them with honesty and intention. If today's episode spoke to you, listeners, take one step forward, your own self-understanding, whether that's asking for help, journaling your story, or simply pausing to check in with your own mind. Because as Kevin shows us, thriving is in business and in life begins with knowing your rhythm and daring to play it loud. Thank you so much, Kevin, and thank you so much, my listeners.
Thanks for having me.